Welcome, and if you're new, welcome back. My name is Adelina and I make videos about living in my tiny house and living intentionally. And today I want to talk about this thing right here, and it is my Lunos E2 HRV system. It is a heat recovery system and an air exchange system, and something that I think is really important for a tiny house. So if that interests you and you want to know how to use it, stay tuned. So I apologize for the lighting. It's very atmospheric. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and I'm about to go out for a nice long walk. But before I do that, I really wanted to make this video because I think that this is probably the most important system in my tiny house. It's one that was expensive to put in. However, in my opinion, I would not build a tiny house without one, and here's why. First, I probably should explain what an HRV system is. HRV stands for Heat Recovery System, and basically what that means is that it's an air exchange system which brings fresh air from outside in and pushes stale air, inside air, out. There's a ceramic core inside the cylinder that goes through the wall. And what it does is when it's pulling air out of the house, it captures the heat, some of the heat from that air into that ceramic core, so that when it starts to pull air into the house, the air is heated up by that ceramic core as it's coming in, which means that it's very efficient. So why do we need one of these? You might be saying to yourself, you know, I grew up in a house that didn't have one. Why do we even need them? Well, that's true. They didn't used to be something. When I was growing up, we didn't have one. You know, hundreds of years ago, they didn't have them. But then again, hundreds of years ago, houses were not as airtight. There were a lot of places in a house where air could leak out and air could come in because they were just not sealed up like today's houses are, which meant that there was always fresh air coming in and always stale air getting out. But we build much more efficiently nowadays, and houses are much more airtight, and therefore there is the concern that the air inside the house is getting stale and that there's not enough fresh air coming in. Because old houses also had all of those air leaks, there was also not the issue of moisture building up, which we also have in houses that are built nowadays because of, again, how airtight they're built. There's also the concern that moisture builds up in there and has nowhere to go and can cause mold and rot and health issues. And an HRV air exchange system is a really good way of managing the air quality in your house, especially in a tiny house. So why do I like the Lunos? First of all, it's apparently easy to install. I did not install mine. But it's also easy to retrofit into a house if you've already got one, and you don't have an air exchange system in there, not attached to your furnace or something like that, which a lot of full-size houses have. Then you can put something like this system in relatively easily. It's easy to retrofit. The Lunos is small and it's relatively quiet and it's very energy efficient. There isn't a heating coil or anything, and then in there it's basically just a small fan that's attached to a controller that has a sensor, a humidity sensor on it. The Lunos are always sold, well, they're not sold in pairs, but they're always used in multiples of two. You can have more than two in a house, in a bigger house, but in a tiny house, you're only going to need two. But you do have to use multiples of two, because if you were just to use one, and it was just going to pull air out, basically you're disrupting the air pressure inside your house. You can't just suck air out of something without creating a vacuum, which then can lead to other issues. I have one here in the bedroom. I have another one over the front entry closet in the at the other end of the house by the front door, and they cycle every 60 seconds. Every 60 seconds, one of them is pushing air out of the house while the other one is pulling air in, and then they reverse. And that ensures that you're always getting good quality air exchange and a nice circulation of air throughout your house. My house has closed cell spray foam insulation, and it's built very well, so it's very airtight. I knew that I was going to need something like this. I had done enough research on tiny houses and building tiny houses, and especially what I did was I researched the problems people were having with their tiny house build. And what I found was the number one complaint that people were having was humidity buildup in their house, condensation building up on the windows, then the windowsills rotting, sometimes mold building up, which is very unhealthy. And inevitably, it was because there was not an air exchange system in the house. The reason I like the Lunos E2 HRV is because I live in a very cold climate. So having a heat recovery system made sense to me, because if I'm going to pull air in the middle of winter when it's minus 25 degrees Celsius, I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but you can look it up. Cold, that's what it is. It's freaking cold. And when it's that cold, you want to be sure that you're heating the air even just a little bit as you're pulling it in. One of the considerations that you're going to have when you're deciding where to put your air exchange system, whatever brand you buy, is the noise factor. Do they make noise? Well, there's a little fan in there, so yes, they make a little whirring sound, especially as they switch from pulling to pushing. You can hear the fan sort of start to whir up. It's not loud. It's basically white noise. It'd be no noisier than having an actual like standing fan in your room, say on a hot day. However, you do hear it. And one of the things I didn't take into consideration when I was putting this system in, or deciding to put this system in, is that apparently the Lunos are one of the quieter ones on the market, but you do want to take that into consideration. If I had to do it over again, would I put this right above my head on my bed? No, I wouldn't. I would put it just behind the camera, in the corner beside the closet, just so that it wasn't right here. When I first moved in, I did notice it. If I was, just drifting off to sleep or wasn't sleeping very soundly, I would sort of hear it. I don't really notice it anymore because I'm so used to it. But it is something that you should probably take into consideration. They don't have to be on absolute opposite ends of the house. They should be relatively on opposite ends, but it could have been anywhere in this bedroom and still function perfectly. It didn't need to be right here. So if I could offer advice on that to anybody who's thinking of building a tiny house and putting one of these in, would be to maybe don't have it right above your head, above your bed. But otherwise, is it noisy? No, not really. You do hear the fan, like I say, whir when it's switching from pushing to pulling, but it's not a loud sound. It's just a sound. So what does it do? It exchanges the air. It also senses and monitors humidity. It really doesn't matter whether you live in a warm climate or a cool climate, a humid climate, or a dry climate. And even if you live in a dry climate, because you're in such a small space, it is sealed so well because of how well it's built, hopefully, and you are showering and cooking and breathing, then you're releasing moisture into your air. If you have propane appliances inside your house, say your stove, you are releasing moisture into the air. And anytime you shower or do laundry, all of those things create moisture, and that needs somewhere to go. In the summertime, if you have your windows open, obviously that can help quite a bit. But even so, it's going to build up and it's going to cause problems if you don't manage it. For me, because like I say, I live in a colder climate, and there is a lot of months of the year that it's not comfortable to have the windows open. This is even more important to manage that. I knew when I was building my house that humidity was going to be a concern. I know I've said this over and over again, and I will keep saying it because I really don't want you to make that mistake. If you're building a tiny house, I really want you to think about that. And so I invested in the Lunos. It was an upgrade to the build, but I would not have built the tiny house without it. So next, I'm going to take you over to the controller, and I'm going to show you how to work it, because the instruction manual that came with the system is not very helpful at all. And I was confused until I figured it out and did some research. So I think I can save you some time and some headache by just going through all of the buttons and showing you what the settings are, what the factory settings are, and why each button is important. The first button you see here is the one that's got the water droplets. And this button here is the humidity mode. So with this button activated, when it's pressed, what you'll see is all 4 lights are glowing, but the brightest one is this one it's on. And so right now my house is at optimal humidity, and so it stays here. But if, say, I had been cooking or showering, or I had a bunch of people over, when we could still do that, and it sensed a higher humidity, what it would do is it would kick up into the next mode or the next mode. Like, these are 4 different settings, with obviously this one being the highest and this one the lowest and the normal one. The manufacturer recommends that you keep this button activated, because that way it just automatically manages the moisture in your house. If you take it off, then it's no longer doing that, and it will just stay at the setting that you set it at. Which brings us to the second button, which is the fan button. So if you don't have it on the automatic humidity sensor mode, you can set the fan setting this way, and you just press it and it goes up to all 4 settings or goes off. Like I say, the manufacturer does not recommend that you use this button. They recommend that you use this one, because then the system works optimally by managing the moisture level automatically. The next button you see is this window button. And the window button symbol stands for intensive ventilation mode. And when you press this button, it will switch to the highest setting for 30 minutes. And you would use this when you have something that's really put a ton of moisture into the air, or you notice that there's condensation on your windows and you want to get rid of it quickly. You would press that button, and it will, like I say, switch to the highest mode for 30 minutes and then go back to the normal setting. Now the moon button. The moon button, when you press that, it actually turns off the fan in the system for 8 hours. Some people will put that on at night when they don't want the fan whirring, because they don't need that moisture control because nobody's up. Or say they've left the house for the day and there's nobody at home and they don't need it on. Often I use it at night in the summertime when it's not rainy, and I have all my windows open anyways, and I don't need to have the fan on because I'm getting plenty of air circulation. After 8 hours, it'll automatically come back on. The next symbol we see is the sun symbol, and that is used in the summertime. It's called a summer mode. When you press that, what you've done is you've turned off the heat recovery system. The fan does stay on, but it no longer warms the air coming in, and just does the air exchange. And it will go for 8 hours and then again switch back to the regular setting. This button here is the event button. This is the button that was lit when my filters were dirty, and that's what'll happen when it needs some maintenance or when the filters need to be cleaned. That light will come on, and that will tell you that you need to go and have a look and clean your filters. They can just be cleaned with soapy water and then dried and put back in. Really super easy to do. And then once you've done that, you've taken care of whatever problem it is, then you press this button and hold it, and the light will go off until the next time you need to clean it. And then finally, you have the on and off button. If you press and hold that for 10 seconds, the system will go off. And these little holes here, that's the actual sensor where it's sensing the air. So that's it. That's everything I know about the Lunos air exchange system. A little, just sort of the basics of what an HRV air exchange system is and why it's important for your tiny house. I hope you found it useful. Like I say, I think it's probably the #1 system in your tiny house, a big consideration and worth spending the money on. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. I can tell from my analytics that 85% of my viewers are not subscribers. So please subscribe and click the little bell notification button. I want YouTube to see the value in recommending the content. Take care. I hope you're having a good year, and I will talk to you next time. Hey, I need that. It's my cheat sheet. I need it.